Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be joined today with Nick from our YouTube channel, who's going to be talking a bit about his journey and sensorimotor OCD. So I'm just going to be adding him in. So we're going to get started in just a moment with Nick. So just waiting for Nick to join me. Hi, Nick. You're here. Good.
What's up, my friend?
Good to have you here. I thought it'd be great to get you on here so we could talk to you about sensorimotor OCD and the recovery journey, as you know quite a bit about that.
Very excited.
And I thought I was speaking to Momin, who handles a lot of our social media, as you know, and he was saying, I think it's a good idea to get some of the moderators onto the channel so that, because everyone knows you guys from the Facebook group, but it's so good to hear your story. And I thought with me asking you different questions about it, especially in relation to sensorimotor OCD, which is such a hidden thing. It's such a thing that, I mean, I know with you going along this journey with me, you were like, what is this that's happening to me at first? Like, how am I ever going to get out of this? And then when you saw the steps bit by bit on sort of how to recover and how to get there, it started making sense. And so I thought, yeah, it'd be good to come on here and talk to you a bit about that and sort of where you're at now. So I thought, why don't we start with, tell me a bit about when you started with sensorimotor OCD and you first got stuck. How long did it take you to realize that this was becoming a problem?
Well, it's a good question because, you know, I think as we all know with the chronic OCD, it's very natural when you first become chronically latched to think, what just happened? You know, I went from this high-functioning doctoral student to this bedridden human who, you know, my wife, as we said, you know, I can't stop thinking about my blinking, which went to my saliva. I would say it took me about 4 months after I went to the mental hospital, and that was when I first met you, 4 to 6 months to really realize that this wasn't going to go away on my own. You know, because we have that belief that we see that, oh, we'll just leave it there. It will just go away on its own time. Unfortunately, as we know, that's not the case. And it really was, it turned my life upside down. And, you know, like I said, just that fear, which we know is the driving primary of the cycle for many of us, if not all of us, the fear of being stuck forever and not being able to focus on the moment or be in my career, that was adding an extra layer of secondary and tertiary problems onto my already drastic fear of hyper-awareness.
Yeah, because it's such a consuming thing. Like, I remember with me, it was just, it feels like you're kind of latched, it's sort of all encompassing in your head, and like how it takes over, it doesn't give you much breathing space, as I often say. And when you don't know what's going on as well, you kind of think nothing's happened to me at first, like it can't be happening. But then you also realize that something's definitely shifted and is not the same as it was.
Absolutely. And if, you know, as we talked about, it really started with tinnitus or tinnitus for me. But it was different because I have friends who are in the military and they would say this to me, Rob. They'd say, I mean, yeah, my ears are ringing, but who cares? And I said, well, I can't stop thinking about my tinnitus. I'm so latched. Remember, and I told you I was checking the doors. I would have my phone on and I would be like, oh, well, this sound doesn't seem like this. I didn't even realize that was OCD because somatic OCD came after that. And I stayed with tinnitus for 4 months before it was about June to September or October.
Was tinnitus the one where you thought, I need to check myself into a mental health hospital? Was that the one that got you to that point?
No, that was somatic OCD.
Yeah, the somatic OCD is like, I remember the tinnitus one, although I have tinnitus, it was like ramped up so much harder with the OCD. But the thing is with sensorimotor OCD, it's so consuming that, like, for example, even doing this Instagram live, if I tried to do this with you, if I'd met you before I did meet you in the journey, right at the beginning when you were at your worst, and I'd asked you to come and speak on here, this would be very, very difficult because when I had sensorimotor OCD, I couldn't speak like this. I'd be so consumed with saliva, my voice, my throat, that I'd be so fixated inwards, I'd be forgetting what I was saying. I'd be finding it hard to focus and hard to breathe, especially when it's the breathing one. When it's the breathing one, you really find it hard to take breaths. I mean, that one can still catch a lot of people with sensorimotor OCD in moments where they're doing like maybe a TV appearance or maybe doing something public speaking. It can catch them because you're when you're more anxious about doing something, you're more aware of your breath anyway. But when you've got that, it's so consuming. It's like you feel sort of it's labored and you're like locked in that.
Yes, I remember I told you my favorite analogy or metaphor when my friends used to ask, because now they'll still ask me, you know, because they see my content. Friends of mine, my whole life that, you know, that have only seen The Aviator, and they're like, wait, what? I thought it was just, you know, germs. And I say, well, imagine this. I say, take 2 Capri Suns and pour them under your mouth 24 hours a day.
It's like that.
My friend said to me, he said, wow, that sounds tough. I'm like, it was.
Yeah,
it was really tough.
No joke.
You know, and then I remember, I like this one too. You know, I was brand new in the practice and I had a patient. I don't think I ever told you this. I was covering for Erica. He had fell off a roof 33 feet onto concrete and split his head open. And that was prior to the accident. And he's telling me this. And I remember it was almost like you say, you're looking into just a ghost. Like his words were going right through me and I was writing things down, but all I was saliva, 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 saliva. And I remember getting back into the exam room when he left to do my note. And I looked at my paper and I was just scribbling words. And
yeah, because the repetitive nature of it as well, it's like with the repetitive word one that I used to get with like one word on repeat trying to sabotage me, which used to specifically get me in things like this, like speaking like this. It would go, just repeat a word, forget everything you're doing, forget everything Nick's telling you, completely muck up everything so that you can't even hold this together. And it used to do that. And so I used to avoid anything to do with me having to speak, me having to do anything where I could be hurt by it more, in the sort of mental hurt. And that's the same as holidays. You want to avoid that because of it. And the worst is being alone. And so talk a little bit about your journey where you ended up in the mental health hospital and you were alone, and that really was a hard trigger in itself.
Of course. So I was just about to take national boards, and that was a 4-hour examination in 25 case rooms. So, I mean, my anxiety, I was doing schoolwork 80 to 90 hours a week alone. It was a very stressful time. I tried to jump out of a moving car. We went to a seminar. I lasted 1 hour, Rob. Erica, I disappeared. Erica found me outside. I was crying in the parking lot, and I said, I'm done. I was like, I'm going to go home, and I was like, it's over for me. So she was driving us home, and I said, where are you going? Because I'm good. I have a very good sense of direction. And she goes, we're going home. And I said, no, we're not. And she said, I'm taking you to the police station. So I opened the car, and I went to jump out of a moving car going 70 miles an hour. I was
not a good move to make in life usually.
Yeah, not a good. There's better moves to make. So the cops came, and in Florida, it's called Baker Act. The police they obviously didn't know OCD, but they knew I was in distress. Erica was in the hallway saying, you need to take him. So the cop said, listen, I have to put handcuffs on you because you're going to be in the back of my car. I'm going to take you, and we're going to confine you for a couple days to help you. So they put me with somatic OCD with no acceptance in a room. Listen to the whole thing, Rob. It was a room with no windows, a plastic mattress, nothing but me, and just waterfall sensations in my mouth for 96 hours.
Yeah, not the best situation, even when you don't have OCD. That sort of, you hear people talking about when they're in any kind of sort of solitary related scenario, that their own mind goes wild even when they've got a pretty robust mental state. But when you're in that position, it's and you're in your worst position because you just ended up in a mental hospital with the anxiety. It ain't easy.
It was a tough situation for a couple things. It was definitely I would say I didn't even realize it was a perspective shift. So when we were allowed out, the other people that were there, Rob, I mean, we're talking like very serious schizophrenic, bipolar. When they moved me to a 2-person cell.
Yeah, but you were very serious with OCD, which you forget at the
I
time.
forget, and the psychiatrist came in, and he asked me normal questions. How long you've been on medication? I say I don't know what's going on. He said, well, what do you mean? He's like, because of the look at my personality, A-type. He's like, you have bipolar. I said, look, man, I can't stop thinking about my saliva. And I remember him leaving. He actually said, I'll be right back. And he left the medical intern, a girl in residency, just me and her. And she was like real awkward. And I said, hey, asking for reassurance. Have you ever heard of someone not being able to stop thinking about their body sensation? She said, I have no clue what you're talking about. And I was like, yeah, I can't stop. And then,
I mean, even in the OCD community, if you say that, and it's not it's not a group where they're too clued up on sensorimotor, they often won't know about it.
No, it was a very unfortunate scenario. And the guy said, again, nothing wrong with him, Rob, as we know. You look at someone like me, you imagine I'm in a manic state. I mean, I was very, very stressed. So he said, he goes, I got to call your family, call your wife. He called Erica. Erica said, the kid can talk to a wall. He's a hyper kid. It's not that. She goes, something else is going on. We think it's OCD. So when they let me out after the 96 hours, they kept me for a day more than they were supposed to by law, which is fine. That's when it really got bad, as you know. I started playing video games. I calculated it actually on my 1 year, Rob. 1 week, I played about 110 hours in 1 week.
Yeah, because you were trying to distract yourself from it. And you were so scared of the thing, and so it got completely out of control with the addiction to video games as well.
So scared, and I tell people now, as you and I talk about.
Yeah, but also what led a bit to that is because you were playing Call of Duty at a very high competitive level, it also becomes like a job. So you'll kind of feel like it's a healthy decision, but you're not aware of how unhealthy it had become.
Yeah, yes, it's definitely, especially if anyone is in here knows how to video game. I mean, you know how all you got to do, Rob, is go on Twitch TV and look at these streamers. They're playing for 72 hours without going to sleep. It's a very unhealthy environment. And kids, unfortunately, see that, and they see these streamers that make $2 to $5 million a year, and they say this, well, that can be me. But little do they know, that's like saying, I'm going to be LeBron James. It's this, it's not a realistic expectation. It just happens. But yeah, when I didn't play video games, this is what it felt like. And Rob, you know how this feels. I'd be playing video games. Nothing. No anxiety, no hyper awareness. I would put my controller down and walk out the door right here. In 2 seconds, everything came back. And I knew something. I'm like, this is not I didn't want to believe it, but I knew that this avoidance behavior had to go. And like I said, May 1st of last year, I just said, this has got to go. It's got to go. And that was really the first step. I
remember that was the first step. It was one of the first things that we really had to get rid of. And you were sort of umming and ahhing. I don't know, Rob, can I do it without giving this up? And I was like, well, that's the main thing,
Yeah, I remember I called you at work and you said we have to treat it like a rehab. You said it's got to go cold turkey. And I see it in the Facebook group. I see people every once in a while. Oh, I love video games. And as you and me both know, look, gone for now does not mean gone forever. But in my opinion, high levels of video game and computer usage going through recovery. I always get stick for that in the community when I say to people, too much computer game use is not healthy. And people often say to me, oh, but it's fun. It's the one thing that I've got and it's part of normal life. I say, well, no, if you're playing it that much, it's usually a compulsion because it gives you that sort of numbed out feeling, which I know you're chasing when you're stuck, but it's not healthy in the long-term structure needed for OCD recovery. No, it's not. And Rob and I have talked about this. Anyone who's listening, to give you an example, I would drink 300 milligram caffeine drinks at 2 to 3 in the morning to stay up for 24 more hours. I wasn't eating. I was smoking the equivalent of almost 2 packs of cigarettes a day with vape. I gained 30 pounds. My wife hated me, rightfully so.
Big transformation.
big
It was.
transformation. And it
It really
also,
was. I mean, when people hear your story, they always say to me, it's unbelievable. If Nick can do it from that situation, I say, you know, you've really got to visualize how difficult that is, like how consuming that was. And what people don't realize is at the, look, as we do when we come out the other side of it, is just right at the core is fear.
it's fear. And it's, as we both know, with both having somatic OCD, suffering from it, I tell people it's very simple, as we know. The number one core fear that keeps us stuck is the fear of it ruining our life or being aware of it forever. And I said this, and if anyone's listening, you know, Rob told me, he said, it's not about not, we've always noticed our breathing, our saliva, our heartbeat from time to time. So we have this belief that we never want to notice it ever again. I used to think that for 12 months.
That's what I thought recovery was. I thought recovery was never. I just thought it was something like that. So I avoided the bath because it was a relaxing time when it came in. I avoided all those things. It was the one that I always thought I could never get rid of.
Yeah,
it was the one that I thought, well, it's like my brain doing it to me. So how can I ever recover from this one? Because the others, all right, I could be scared of it, but if I know that it will ruin my life all the time, how the hell am I going to stop that?
Yes, it definitely has its own, just as I'm sure, just as POCD, or any of the HOCDs, they all have their own, you know, difficulties that need to be managed to them.
Unique elements that make it sort of like that.
I think the somatic OCD, the unique element that leaves a lot of people stuck is that, again, as we both know, there's nothing inherently wrong with mindfulness, but the more that you try to bring yourself in, you're already so internal.
Yeah, with sensorimotor going more internal, that's what made me feel like I'd never get out of it, because and even then when you distract yourself, you can't escape. You try and go more internal, you can't escape. But that core fear, like we're saying about the fear of your life being ruined if you're stuck like this, was there.
Yeah, and man, I really think that of all the books that really kind of drove up I've read it now 3 times. I used to just think, I remember the first time I read.
Of course you have. That's the kind of intensity you are.
Of course. I've read all the books like
100 times.
But when I was reading it the first time, I remember I couldn't even focus. Like it was just, and I would think about what you would say. I'm like, don't try and focus. Just get through word by word if you can. And I remember thinking, wow, if that guy can go through Auschwitz and just, I mean, 3 years of just malnourishment, working, watching people die all around you.
And all his family die. Yeah.
His whole family died. And, you know, it's actually funny. And it sounds a little cliche, but he used to say in the book, if you remember, I would picture myself giving lectures out like on the other side about my experience. And I really didn't think that the OCD community would be as big as a part as it is in my life now, because I absolutely love it. And I really help, because we get it. You see it all day. I see the Facebook group. People really think that they're stuck and there's no hope. Because unfortunately with somatic OCD specifically, the advice for treatment is just not usually what gets them to recovery. It's
those core fears. It was until I really saw that even if it was persisting through the day, it was never as bad as the lie it was telling me. Like it was telling me like, okay, if you go to a concert, it's going to be there 4 hours the whole time. And you think it's going to be there every second, because you do experience that at times when it's chronic, but realistically it's not that level. And then you see, oh, I just did an hour, I just did half an hour, I just did 20 minutes. And that builds up. And so then I thought, well, wait a minute, if I'm not scared of this, does it lose its weight? Because it feels like a missile in your head. And so when you are not scared, that becomes disarmed. And then you think, oh, actually, it doesn't feel as punchy. But it's that sort of punchiness that you feel that makes you think, I'm never getting out of this. When you were playing the computer games, that sort of numbed back a bit, often, but not always.
Yes. And the best thing I ever heard, this is actually before I met you, one of my buddies who had been following you for a while, who also had somatic OCD, he said to me, it's not the sensation. And I didn't realize this at the time. He goes, you're afraid. He goes, you think the sensation is the problem. Just like I said, it's the fear of it. That's it. It's just the fear of the sensation, because we breathe, we salivate, we blink, we have heartbeats. We just know this weird sensations. And I think the one thing that you talk really well about is humans' perception of comfort. You know, we have this belief as OCD sufferers that we're never supposed to have an uncomfortable sensation. It has
Of course.
to be bliss. Just
I used to get that OCD with clothes. So when I
yeah,
was about 13, 14, let's say 16, and I was going out on dates, and I was thinking, oh, if I wear this shirt and it feels uncomfortable, that whole date will be crap because I'll be sitting there the whole time thinking this shirt feels uncomfortable. So then I wouldn't wear those shirts or not know which ones felt comfortable. Same with socks. Used to think that. Now that sounds absolutely ridiculous. Now, although that didn't get to a chronic format like the other ones, it was causing a problem. And that's because it was the fear of discomfort. But whenever I was out, I forgot about it. The same as you forget anything. Even if someone spilt a drink on you and you think, oh, I'm wet, I've got to go and change. Even if you carried on the conversation, you'd forget about it, right? It's things that it's the fear of the discomfort in that form, which is where it is.
absolutely. And Oliver's video that he did yesterday or 2 days ago about unconditional self-acceptance, he said something so perfect. He said, it goes to show you how much fear plays into this. He goes, when you talk to other people in the community, Kirsty has said this too, you'll look at someone who might have OCD, like Oliver, and I'll say to myself, I mean, with my history as we both, I've never had anything like that. And that it goes to show you that the fear is the only outlying factor that's linking them all together.
Yeah, and what something activates it. Like it doesn't. Somebody else could have a bit of a fear, but it doesn't activate on that. But then if it can get a grip on something, it does. Like you hear people with ROCD just say, "Never had a problem with OCD." Then one day my boyfriend just said, "Are you sure you love me?" And then it was just like boom,
boom,
and that's how it goes. Nick, what I was going to ask you is because you know you're always in the Facebook group and so on. What would you say for people that not just sensorimotor OCD, but let's start with sensorimotor OCD first of all. What would be your main tips for somebody who comes to you now and says, "Look, I'm suffering with sensorimotor OCD. Where do I start?" What would you say?
As we both know, patience took a long time for me, and balance. I think that somatic OCD people really want on right now because, as you said, it's not that you can escape OCD when you're chronically suffering, but because somatic OCD really tends to be like being waterboarded, drip, like that internal sensation, really looking at the core fear and breaking it down slowly in a non-compulsive manner while showing self-compassion. As we know, I was really bad with that. You know, that you are standing. Right now, you have a belief that you can't stand it. But I had somatic OCD blasting away for 17 months, and I stood it every second. It wasn't comfortable, and there's no way I enjoyed it. But I still could stand it. And I think for all OCD, as we know, acceptance is a feeling. It's not.
Yeah, it's an experience like state that people always like. How do I get there? How do I force that? How do I do it? It's like, well, you can't. How do you force the feeling you feel when looking at a sunset? You can't. It's an observation that then comes about, and I think that's a key point that people do tend to get so caught up and then go more internal, which is the opposite. It's like I often say, like trying to learn French in a day. If you're trying to do that, you're just forcing, and you're getting nowhere.
You get nowhere. So the acceptance, as we know, is huge. Somatic OCD, before I found nothing ever talked about the fears. It talked about, you know, just saying this to yourself. This was actually a big recommendation I saw at the facilities. They would say, just say this to yourself all day. Oh, I'm just a guy who thinks about my blink.
Becomes a massive compulsion.
Very quickly, as we know. You know, working on the core fear and then taking the ups and downs as best as you can. Because I was still having major setbacks 9 to 10 months into my journey. And I think we just had this belief that, because as you always talk about, be OCD free in a week, be OCD free in 30 days, 6 months. Unfortunately, from my experience being friends with all the moderators now, none of us really recovered in 6 months. It's just the
No, it's
reality.
not a thing like that. You do see, like, sometimes we see people, we see in the groups, you see someone, or someone will come in, they'll be with me for a very short time, couple of weeks, and they were really bad, and it just, certain things registered, and they felt long period of relief. But it usually tends to have setbacks, they come back in, and then it takes a while to balance out. Some people, it's just chronic, really hard work for months till it reduces. My own journey was sort of like an 18-month period, on and off periods of months. Wow, so much difference. And then having to do that. But I didn't have all the tools that you guys have today with the things that are there. But like, I think with Sensorimotor, it's so consuming that you, until someone shows you that there is a way out, you don't even fathom it. You don't even believe it. You think there's never a way out.
No, and to real quick go back to like when it latched for me. I mean, I was driving it in the beach in Daytona in Florida, and I remember it perfectly. I don't dwell on it, but I remember it. I had a thought, even though you know how OCD is weird like this. I said, oh, what are some things that you do in life and you don't notice? I said, foot on the gas pedal, and I felt it. And then my brain went, what about your blinking? And like, we know, it was like this. Light switch, full panic mode, boom, 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 boom. I got back to my parking lot.
You probably had about 4 Red Bulls that day anyway.
Oh, yeah, for sure, probably 1,000 milligrams of caffeine. And I was on the ground, and Erica said to me, what's going on? And I looked up at her from the ground, and I said, I can't stop thinking about my blinking. Now, to a like, she looked at me.
You're a non-sufferer. That's like, what does that even mean? You know?
She goes, what does that even mean? I don't get what you're saying here. You know? So the acceptance is key for everyone listening right now. ERP, as we know, exposure response prevention is great. Definitely some people with more outward physical compulsions, gold standard. But there are a lot of people like myself who may have felt stuck because they don't know what exposures to do. You know, they're like, what exposures do I do for noticing?
That's the thing that always gets people stuck. That's what always makes them worry, because they think, because I can't think of any exposures, how am I ever going to get out of this? Because there's nothing that gets under this particular fear.
Yes. And as we talked about, the exposure to somatic OCD is experiencing the sensation like you're already doing. Going about your day as best as you can, and then slowly start working on your beliefs. And as Rob can tell everyone listening, the amount of times I messaged Rob and said, I think I have to dispute today. And you know, you're like, no. You're like, just nope. You're looking for certainty.
You feel like it because it feels so intense. You think there's got to be something to do that. But it's these gradual shifts in awareness. And the thing is with Sensorimotor, it's like people messaging on the comments here, oh, I really wouldn't want to have that. I don't care if I have that. Nick doesn't care if I have that. If he has that. No. I don't care if I have any OCD thoughts. That's what recovery is. They're not different. They're all just thoughts, but the severity is just sort of the unique way that it just gets a grip. But it's not worse than the other. It's our perception of how bad it is that makes it feel that way.
Yes, and it's funny when people say that to me, the comparative suffering, as you speak about and you speak about, it's very easy to fall down the trap of, oh, well, I have breathing OCD. And then someone with somatic OCD, I've had people say this. Could you imagine how easy it must have been to have contamination OCD? I said, go tell that to Howard Hughes.
Yeah, go tell that to the people that I work with every day that have spent 10 years living in their house and not left the house and consumed to one chair. Everyone's perspective thinks, oh, the other one's so much worse. You know?
Yes, and as you say perfectly, it feels as real as it's going to get. If it didn't do that, you and me would have just said to ourselves in the beginning of our journey, okay, and we would have never suffered. But it has to make it feel real. It has to hit, like, it's like someone's like snapping you in the back with a rubber band all day. They're trying to get your attention. And then once you realize that snapping sensation is annoying, but it's not stopping me from, remember I tell you, everyone listening, I was chronically suffering and hiking 12 and 13,000 foot mountains in snowstorms.
Yeah, because where you live in Colorado is amazing for hiking, but just to highlight the steepness of those things.
Yeah, you know, people said to me, you know, how did you get out there and do that when you were suffering? I get that all the time.
Yeah, but you are also a pretty a kind of character that really does go for it, because you had COVID, you were on oxygen in the hospital, and then in a few weeks later you were hiking up one of the tallest mountains. So you're a bit of a nutcase anyway.
I remember that. Yeah, and that was interesting too. That was if anyone doesn't really want to know what it's like going through COVID with somatic OCD, I mean, we're talking. I couldn't breathe. My oxygen levels were bad. I was on oxygen for 4 days. I mean, somatic OCD was just like, it was just hammering me in the head. And I remember,
yeah, it actually got you though in another way there, because then it got you with the fear of death, bang, in that moment, which is natural. No one's going to like that, being on oxygen in a hospital with COVID.
I remember messaging the group and I said, all right, guys, I think I have to say my goodbyes. And then when I got out of it, you realize just how irrational I was being. Because I've never had a fear of death in that perspective. But you're right, in that moment, it got me. It definitely did get me for a couple days. You know?
Yeah, it's the thing like that. But you're lucky because with Erica, your partner, your wife's been so good, and you've always had good support with your OCD. I mean, she was there from the beginning. She was the one who originally put you in a mental health hospital. You didn't really need to be in a mental health hospital, but because she didn't know what else to do at that time. But it's because of the support that was there. Now, Nick, what I was going to say to you now is, when you're in the Facebook groups in general, in terms of OCD, what would you say to, what would your advice be to the general sort of OCD community in wherever they are with OCD right now, apart from patients, like in other areas, reassurance, avoidance, sort of fear of fear, being stuck forever? What kinds of advice would you give those guys?
Reassurance is definitely sneaky, as we know. Most people, unfortunately, that start sentences with, I'm not looking for reassurance, but 100% of the time is reassurance. And I get that it takes a while to learn that. Something that worked for me, and I'm not saying this is going to work for everyone, I don't know how you feel about this. We've talked about this. I would really, before I would say something, I would say to myself, do I need the answer to that question right now, or can I wait it out a couple days? And the reality was, I could wait it out, no matter how anxious I was. That dire need that we all have to need the answer right now needs to be brought down. It needs to be brought down, because the certainty of the answer is keeping us stuck.
Yeah, but that is a problem in all of society. We all want things now because that's the sort of culture of how we all work and live and eat and do everything.
Social media, look at what I do as my side job with the business. I deliver people's food. We can do everything from our homes. We don't even have to go out and talk to people anymore. You know, it's created such a low frustration tolerance. I know people have given us kickback on this, but the reading list is absolutely vital. It's vital. The only way to learn how irrational beliefs operate is to read those books. And whether you're like me, who suffers with more physical anxiety symptoms, you know, Claire Weeks and Paul David's books are terrific. But the reading list is going to be so important. And if you're really suffering the beginning of your journey, you're not going to be able to concentrate more than likely the whole time. So take it day by day, and don't do what I did, because Rob knows me. I remember when I would text Rob, and it would be like 3 days after we talked, I would say, I just read a book. Like I was reading, like I wasn't even retaining the information, because I have to know it right now. So slowing things down.
It's always that intensity. Like I know whenever you know, I work with quite a few people with sensorimotor OCD, and I often say to them, would they like to speak to you as well on the call with me, so they can meet somebody who's been through the journey like themselves? And you always see straight away in the first few minutes that it's the intensity that they want rid of it now, and the panic, which is natural, because I mean, if OCD is understood by very few people, the sensorimotor is even less. So people then already think, God, I'm never going to recover. And that fear of fear, plus that immediately wanting it gone, is the core driving catalyst.
Yes. And I just talked to someone 2 days ago who messaged me, and I'm sure a lot of people have this. I'm sure maybe you went through this. People say to me, well, my OCD is telling me that because Albert Ellis wasn't OCD specific, to don't try. But we have to look at the time-tested method that you, the moderators, all of us got results. The places we've come from, like Oliver, 1 year of exposures, didn't let it go.
Yeah, Oliver was doing exposures for 1 year at Specialist Treatment Centre. He'd been doing them all the time. He was feeling completely hopeless when he came to me, especially with how sort of isolating POCD is, with the sort of social related sort of elements of that. And he was feeling like there was no hope at all. And it took quite a few months before he started to see those beliefs shifting bit by bit by bit. And he's going to be on here doing an Instagram live with me soon, similar to yourself, talking about that journey, which is obviously with POCD is such a common one that people suffer from and never talk about. So for you guys that are watching this, I'll be joined at another point with Oliver and some of the other mods. And today we're hearing from Nick talking about sensorimotor. But what I want to talk about is the overlap. A lot of these things overlap. So like ROCD, HOCD overlaps. Sensorimotor can overlap with fear of going crazy, health-related fears, fear of physical anxiety, treatment resistance, never ever getting better, fear that your brain's broken, fear that it's going to cause a PTSD or some other kind of disabling disorder. Did you have any of that, Nick, that sort of tied in with that?
So to premise into that, I do want to say this because I think it's important real quick, and then we will talk about that. Rob and I both know in my journey now, I'm working on my anger irrational beliefs, my body images. There's a big belief that you cannot be at peace unless you have no anxiety at all. So right now, sitting here, I still have anxiety from my other things. I feel it, but it's not affecting me at all. I think that's really important to highlight because people have this belief in the Facebook group, they never want to feel anxiety ever again.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. It's like when you talk about your journey, it's like, you know, you're in a chronic state with sensorimotor OCD, feeling like there was no way out, to now where fully functioning, can't tell any difference, and then you're working on some OCD-related anxiety fears that are attached to a few things that are holding subtly the sort of last ones to go. So, like in my own journey, you take the main bulk of it out, the 95%, you barely can't tell much difference in quality of life. Then that last 5%, that was what needed going under. And some of those haven't raised their head until sort of recently. You thought, oh, actually, I've noticed that I get angry with quite a lot of things. Now you're much calmer and much more rational than you were, but there are little elements there to work on. But I think that's the big difference between this sort of chronic phase where you're completely locked up in it and you can't see a way out.
No,
you know?
no way out.
There's no comparison.
Absolutely. And to premise into what you were saying, I guess the only real subcategory of fear that I had with somatic OCD was I never had a fear of it like driving me crazy because I'm already a little, you know me.
A little bit crazy. Yeah.
I never had that thought.
We know that.
We know that. I never had that thought. I never had any fears of any other anxiety, like health-wise. It really, for me, came down to I'm not going to be able to do what I want to do. It's always going to be there, and it's going to distract me forever. And then I started to think, well, look at some of these people in my business meeting in person. I'm like, look how distracted they are. It's not bothering them. You know, they're like looking at the ceiling. But internally, you're like, I'm so distracted. I must not be distracted.
I don't think what the thing with sensorimotor, what people don't realize is like, it's like all of these, it's not just the fear. Like if you just had anxiety, you just had a fear, say a fear of having hurt someone in the past or fear of relationship thing or health. There's fear, that just feels like fear and anxiety. But OCD is this like sort of pounding mechanism. So it kind of doesn't give you a break. It's like an internal torture cycle. And then with sensorimotor, it feels like that just on repeat because it knows it can get you every single second because it knows that the sensation is there. So some of them you get a bit of a break because you think I'm away from it, but other ones because it's in your head in that moment, it keeps going.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting about OCD because people ask me, do you have a lot of intrusive thoughts? And I'm sure you see other people like this too, Rob. I say, you know, my stuff is mainly physical. It's sensation based. I don't really have images. I've never had images of like hurting an animal or anything. That discomfort, like the clothes. I've had that too. You know, I'd be wearing my shirt and be like, oh my gosh, so annoying on my arm cuffs. You know,
Yeah, which you can draw on here. One of your favorite sections from the book is Low Frustration Tolerance by Albert Ellis.
Gosh, I can't even tell you guys how bad my low. That's going to be the number one last thing to go. I didn't even realize just how bad as a society, and then with having OCD on top of that. I mean, Rob, my dogs would pull me the wrong way, and I would freak out because of the discomfort. I can't handle my dogs pulling me in each direction. Like, I didn't even realize how bad my low frustration tolerance was. And for all you guys, Rob asked me this, if you remember, we've talked about this. With our first meeting, you said to me, what happens if I told you you were going to get better, but it was going to take you 3 years? And I said, no, that's impossible. And now, if you said to me, you know what, Nick, you might not actually fully ever see what you want to see, and it's going to take you another 20 years to work on that anger. I mean, what choice do we have? I don't have any choice. I mean, what am I going to do? Sit in my bed and cry? No, I have to get up and move throughout my day, and I'm not putting down the suffering.
Yeah, but it's easy to get into that position of sitting in bed and crying at the beginning of that when you were stuck, because you can't see a way out and you've got no tools what to deal with. So it's understandable. But then as time goes by, you realize that that's a zero return investment. It never gets you out. It never gets you anywhere. It never does anything proactive, positive in your life in the direction you're going, you know? But frustration tolerance is in all areas. I mean, you're working in chiropractic. You're a doctor in chiropractic. You see people with incredible pain. Like I've got an bulging disc in my neck. I notice it when I'm using this Instagram Live because I haven't got a tripod here. But that situation is like, well, that pain, a lot of it is psychological, because you notice it and you think, oh, fuck, that pain's there. That's come on. Oh, I haven't been stretching enough or doing whatever. And then you think, God, you sort of subconsciously almost, it's like you're watching out for it because you haven't felt it for ages. But when it's been really bad for months and months and months, then you're all right with it, because you're not always, but once you change your perspective with it, you are more all right with it, because you realize, well, it's not going to kill me. So the brain is turning down that pain response as it realizes it's not something that needs immediate attention.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because of my experiences, and not a lot of my patients understand this. You would be surprised. I talked about this with Brianna. You'd be surprised on how many of my patients who have chronic pain, I do all my clinical examination, and I say this to them, Rob. I say, hey, look, I think something's going on with your psychosomatic pain referral. And then they'll say, no, something has to be wrong. I say, well, nothing's pointing to that, you know, because this even affects the general population, non-OCD sufferers alike. They get so afraid of pain, and then they think they never feel any pain. So think about what that does to the OCD sufferer.
Oh my God, yeah.
If it can do that to a non-sufferer, I mean, I have patients, no distress issues, but they say to me, I say this, Rob, to my one patient, how often do you think about your low back pain? They say, wow, I guess I never thought about that all day. I say, yeah, it's you think in your mind that you shouldn't feel that. And they say to me, wow, yeah. They're like, I guess that's true. They don't even realize they're doing it. And it's just,
yeah, there's loads of great talks about that, with people coming back from war zones when they're in a helicopter and they've just been saved, and they realize they're going home to their friends and family. Their view of the pain was very different to when they were in the war zone, because they've now related the pain in their brain to being saved and the life that they want. So all those things are very much perspective based when it comes to pain, the same as all these things.
Absolutely. And I think, like we said, the number one thing is for everyone listening, you know, again, exposures are important. Uncertainty is important. We got to look at our fear. We got to look at what the core fear is. And we get, Rob, how many times do you get asked this question? You know, how often should I be disputing? I mean,
oh my God, all the time, because we're always looking for a way to get rid of it instantly. So what exposures? That's always the one. What exposures to the specific one? After a certain amount of time, it's changing your perspective. It's like the exposures we view as this sort of golden ticket to instant relief. So then we chase it till it's gone.
Yes. And so when people ask me, well, do you dispute now? And I say, this is how I live my life in the area of recovery I'm in and working on. I go throughout my day doing everything I can. If something pops up that is bothering me because of where I am, as you and me both know. We're in a different place in recovery. You and me, it's not engaging, but in the moment, we can both say this to each other, like, they're like, come on, Nick, low frustration tolerance. But when you're chronically suffering, that's
100%.
it's a slippery slope.
Nick, the other thing I was going to say to you is the social element. With all these things, you feel so locked and alone, like nobody's got it. So like when you came into the community and you realized like, and you know, we were building that community at the time with the Facebook group and all the WhatsApp group stuff, just meeting other people that had the same thing as you was a game changer to realize, look, I'm not actually like, because it's easily, you think with that your life's like literally over and you're going into that mental health hospital and not getting out.
Yes, I remember I remember Googling, and I'm very fortunate. I've never had a Googling issue. But in the beginning, rightfully, I was just typing into Google, can't stop thinking about my blinking, and then I'm like, what is going on right now? Because I was so distressed. And when I came to the community, and as we both talked about, who he's now one of my friends, I remember watching Paul Little's video 1 year into recovery.
Great guy. Yeah.
2 years ago. Also a little crazy like
another crazy character like you.
And I remember
I get them all in. I seem to attract all these characters.
You do. You get a few of them. And when we first talked, he said the same things to me. He's like, you just have this, you have a belief that you need to get rid of it. He goes, that's never going to get you anywhere, man. He's like, I hate to say it to you, because that was the thing. It took me a while to realize, not, I would say, full acceptance, but much better perspectives that no matter what's going on in your life, whether it's OCD or not, the exaggerated fear is keeping you in that hamster wheel. Once you start to break it down rationally, whether it's watching documentaries of people living in iron lungs, the guy who got
that iron lung one's always a great example. That lawyer lived in an iron lung, so a polio survivor, spent his whole life living basically on his back in a steel cage. I mean, that life's got to be pretty hard in that place, and the guy's laughing and enjoying life. And it's the same as people hearing your story and they think, Jesus, look how bad that guy's story got to. And then you think of where you are now, and it's an inspiration to people because they see, well, look, if that guy can come from that to there, well, what hope there is for me? And there is so much, And that's the way to always look at it with these things. It's OCD sort of mounts and mounts and mounts till you think, shit, I'm in this situation I'm never going to get out of, the worst position ever, and you can't see a way out, and it feels like so all-consuming, and that's how you easily get into that position. You get into that position of thinking that.
It's very easy to fall down the rabbit hole, because as we both know, OCD loves to isolate us. It loves for us to make us feel like we're the only one. And going back to somatic OCD, oh my gosh, Rob, you know how that goes. They're like, well, I can't stop thinking about the bridge of my nose, so I must have a different type of somatic OCD. They'll be like, well, I don't have breathing, blinking.
I always say to people, look, you've got a much nicer route than I had, because when I had to go through it, although Albert Ellis had laid a lot of the work, I had to still find it all and build it. So it was a very sort of uncertain road where I didn't know if I was going to recover at all. And now there's so many people with stories and their journeys, and it's very, very different. I mean, then think of the generations before me. No internet, no books, oh God. Sensorimotor in 1700, you wouldn't want that.
We always talk about that, you and I. It's imagine the chances of you finding someone in 1500 that has OCD.
Oh my God, zilch.
You can't say it, especially
they'll think you're the devil and burn you on a stake.
And imagine this that we've never talked about. Imagine being a female with OCD with the witch period. Oh, you're done. You're done. They're burning you. You're done. You're dead. They're burning you at the stake or throwing you in a cage in the water.
Yeah, and so that's what would have happened. So people would have been very scared to say it, and then so no one would have ever come out about it. And then when mental health hospitals came about, asylums, they were sort of left in there, and it was just something that was based on a fear cycle, but no one had any understanding, which is incredibly sad when you watch The Aviator, the Howard Hughes, the Scorsese film about the life of Howard Hughes, and you think of how his situation got to that. I always think, God, if only I could have spoken to him for half an hour in the past, but whether he would have listened or not is a different story. Nick, what I was going to say is your story is a real inspiration to everyone in the OCD community. As you can see by the comments in here, it's always great to have you in the Facebook group, helping with everyone in there. And definitely want to get you on here again. I'm sure everyone on here will definitely want to see you back on here soon.
Absolutely.
Talking about maybe coming on again with yourself or with your partner Erica, because she's so good for the friends and family element. And I know there's so many friends and family on here that want advice for their family that are going through OCD and feel completely alone. And it's so great to hear about your story as a couple and how she helped you with that journey as well. So yeah, I hope to have you both on here soon. Any last words, Nick? Anything you want to say to anyone with OCD at the moment going through a difficult time?
I think that when you're chronically suffering, the best thing to do is take it day by day. Drop the timelines, drop the search for happiness, drop the dire need for feeling better in the moment, because it may be, but it's really keeping you stuck. It's really, really keeping you stuck, guys. I know it's uncomfortable if some of you are really suffering. Day by day, try your best not to do the internal thermometer, checking, you know, did I feel like this yesterday? That more than likely will not come down until the fear comes down. You know, you're not a hopeless case. You're not a lost cause. Recovery is not easy, but you have no other choice. You have to move forward, or unfortunately, recovery is not just going to come to you. You got to go out there, you know.
Thank you so much for the great words. You've been very, very helpful to everyone. We're going to get a lot more stuff on Sensorimotor as it's not covered enough, and we will see you back on here soon. Thanks a lot, Nick. I'll see you later.
Have a good one, guys.
Take it easy. See you guys.